Welcome to Front Row, a podcast for students where we engage culturally relevant topics in a biblically faithful way. In each episode, we'll take your questions about life and culture, and we'll answer them with biblical truth and practical insight to help you stay in the front row of the discussions and situations that shape your life and the world around you. Thanks for joining us in the front row. Enjoy the episode. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Front Row. Josh here with the Archbishop of TikTok herself, Marcy Lynn. Tell them what's up.
What? The Archbishop of TikTok? What
That's
does
right.
that even mean?
That's right. I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with fun ways to introduce you. So we had like the minister of middle school magic at one point, and then Mayhem, actually I think it was, and then the rowdy reverend, and now you are the Archbishop of TikTok.
All right. Well, happy to be here.
I'm glad you're happy. Are you still happy to be here? Less than you were 30 seconds ago.
We'll see in a couple minutes.
If you guys have any fun ideas for how I can introduce Pastor Marcy Lynn, feel free to send them my way because I'm running out of religious titles to use for her. So if you
I'm not sure you can count any of those religious.
Minister, Reverend, and Archbishop are
of
all
TikTok?
religious. It's like sort of
I'm
religious,
going to
but not
add those
totally.
to my resume when I'm like
you
looking
should.
for a job one day.
I think you should. As long as you put like one of our students down as a reference for it.
I'll probably put you down because you're the one that coined me.
Can't wait. Let me tell you all about the Archbishop of TikTok. She keeps it real. R-E-E-L. What? All right. Enough of these shenanigans.
Ugh.
How's your week been, Pastor Marcy Lynn?
Pretty good. It's almost Valentine's Day.
That it is. What are your plans?
I think we're just going to hang out at home. We didn't really come up with any plans.
I heard your husband, though, has some plans in the works.
I'm pretty sure that's not the thing. John is great, but plans are not his forte. So my guess is we'll just hang at home, which is fine. I'm a homebody.
Okay.
I think there is it's kind of obnoxious to try and get like dinner reservations on Valentine's Day. So I'd be fine just hanging.
All right,
What are
sweet.
you and Mackenzie doing?
Probably the same. I think we are planning on going out a different day of that week.
That's a good
But to go out on Valentine's Day is too crazy and also too basic, you know? Like,
Yeah, you don't want to fit that mold. Come on.
right. So we'll probably chill at home. We like to do date nights in sometimes because it's hard to find babysitters. And so
Yeah.
we're like, put the kids to bed and
Kids
like
go to
order
sleep
food and then watch a movie or something like that. So probably
Nice.
do something like that.
Nice.
Valentine's Day is notoriously not a great day though in our family. I pretty much pee on myself every time Valentine's Day comes around and just don't do a good
I
job.
feel like this year you can do better.
I can do better.
I believe in you, and this will change the tide forever.
New year, new
New
me.
you.
That's it. I mean, it's February, but it's never too late to start a new year. All right. Let's get this thing back on track. We are continuing. We're in episode 8 of this shindig. And again, as we remind you guys with regularity, every episode is in response to questions that we've gotten from our students. And so sometimes we mess with them to make the questions a little bit more coherent, or sometimes we make them kind of go a different direction with them. But more often than not, it's like, hey, this is a question a kid sent, and we're just going to jump in and we're going to address it. Part of the reason for that is because we feel like it's helpful just to have questions, a space to submit questions, and a space to have those questions answered. Probably the most ideal space to do that is in like a life-on-life discipleship relationship, which we hope all of you guys are in. If you're not, and you're around where we have church campuses, you're invited here. And if you're listening from somewhere far, far away, like New Zealand, what are the chances of that?
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. Chances.
We should all go visit them.
I agree. If you're from New Zealand and listening to this, hit us up, and we'll make that happen.
Buy us some plane tickets.
Well, that feels like a big request. But anyways, we hope that you guys have those people. You have peers and mentors and pastors and leaders who are speaking into your life and creating safe spaces for you to have questions asked. But this is one of those spaces as well. And so we're going to jump in because this is being dropped on Valentine's
Yeah,
Day.
it is.
And so we thought there's got to be a question in here. That'd be a great one to address for Valentine's Day. And there is.
There is. It also fits with the series we're talking about right now.
Ooh,
So,
tell me more.
Yeah, so we're talking in our series right now about how we were created to belong. So talking about relationships and the context of those relationships. And today's question addresses romantic relationships.
Bum, bum.
You have the exact question, so I'm going to let you read the student's
I was hoping
question.
you would just make it up.
But
Here it is. It's a 2-parter. Can I find and connect with a romantic partner? Can I find and connect with a romantic partner? So we'll spend some time addressing that first. And the second part of the question is, how do I navigate the complex world of attraction, dating, breaking up, engagement, and marriage? and somebody just fell outside of our office.
That's
I don't
really
know
loud.
what just happened, but
Somebody drove through the wall.
I hope they are okay. So, can I find a connect with a romantic partner? Marcy Lynn, a student comes to you and asks this. What say you?
Yeah, I think I would have a whole lot more questions surrounding that question, but that's part of the struggle sometimes when we answer these questions is we don't always know what context it was asked in. I think due to the nature of their follow-up question to that, we can kind of see like this person wants to know as a Christ follower, like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
What do we do with this? But if we just kind of take that first part, can I find and connect with a romantic partner? Yes. Like, I think like,
It was not a very confident yes.
well, I think some of the things that go into that, like, are your parents okay with you engaging and finding a romantic partner?
Sure.
Would you be sinning against your parents and the boundaries that they establish for you if you choose to do that? Then I
Right.
would say don't do that.
Sure.
But, like, is it physically possible? Then yes, I think you have the God-given ability to connect with another human being
Yeah.
in that way.
There you have it. And again, I think that's just another solid reminder for why that even an environment like this, a podcast, is insufficient to attend the question totally, right? And so hopefully for those of you guys listening to this, I hope this is encouraging. I hope it's thought-provoking. I hope it's even challenging sometimes. But it, honestly, my hope and my prayer is that it drives you into further conversation around these things. And so spend time in prayer and seeking the leading of the Spirit. Spend time in church and talking with people there, peers and leaders as well. And we don't assume that within 30 minutes or so we
We're
can
going to answer
exhaustively
everybody's questions.
Yeah,
And like
exactly.
know the unique specificity of their life.
Yep.
Like so much of this is dependent on what are your circumstances, where are you at in life, where is that person at in life, and those things just can't be answered on a podcast in 30 minutes.
For sure. So you said yes. Generally speaking, you probably have the capacity to enter into some form of romantic relationship, right? The exact how and the nuances of that, TBD. But where does that longing come from? Like, why is that even a question to be asked? What might you say to a student in that vein?
Yeah, I think it's really important to even just name out loud that it's important for our students to ask that question. Because I know, we work with students a lot. We were high schoolers at one point in time in our lives. And I think the natural kind of inclination is like, as we're engaging with people that maybe we are attracted to, there's maybe not a lot of thought that goes into engaging with them. And maybe more does when you're starting to think about like a serious relationship or do I want to date this person? But when it comes to attraction and how I'm interacting with them, a lot of times it's just like in the moment, you're having fun, this feels good, and you just kind of go with it. And so to even challenge you guys to ask that question, why am I doing this? And what's the motivation for wanting this? Where does this longing come from? And am I stewarding it appropriately is a really hard thing to ask, but I think it's so important.
Yeah.
And so then I think it then goes into, okay, where does this longing come from? And we talked about this in Mosaic is, we've talked about this in some of our past podcast episodes too, of God actually created us to be made in his image, which is a God who communes with himself. And therefore, being in his image, we were made for community with other people. And so that longing to be known, to be connected, to have relationships that are intimate is actually part of how we're made.
Yeah.
And so that's where that longing comes from. God created human beings with that longing.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there, and kind of a nod to the Trinity, which maybe is worth unpacking more fully in another episode. We should probably have Pastor Clayton on for that one because
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. Pastor Clayton's our teaching pastor. He's like the smartest person I've ever met, so he'd be able to unpack that really well for all of us. But so that idea of God being in communion with Himself. In relationship with himself for all of eternity, and us reflecting that in the way that we live. And then too, it's not just like an idea. It's spelled out in Scripture, right? God creates. I remember just talking about this at a recent event we just had. Maybe it was in the teaching video. I can't remember. But God creates, and He creates it all, and He describes it as very good. The very first thing described as not good is it is not good for man to be alone, right?
Yeah.
And so God creates Eve out of Adam. In a lot of spaces, that's used as a kind of a justification for a biblical view of marriage, and I think there's merit to that, and we could certainly go down that in another episode. But in this case, I think just at bottom, that's just a affirmation of the need to be related to and connection to other human beings.
Right.
Because you look at the rest of creation, and there were plants and animals according to their kind, and birds and fish according to their kind, but there was nothing like humanity,
For Adam,
right? There's
yeah.
nothing for Adam, and so God creates a companion. And so I think, to your point, to have this desire shouldn't be demonized. Like, it shouldn't be like, to have a desire to be in relationship with other people is a natural thing. Now, there's the romantic element that probably just makes it a specific sort of relationship, and so I think there's a nuance to kind of call out here, and that is to say, you were created to be in relationship with people. That does not guarantee or necessitate that you will be in a romantic relationship with any or all of those people, right?
Yeah, you were not created for romantic relationships. You were created for intimate relationships with others.
Yeah.
And romantic relationships can be one expression of that longing, but it is not the only one, and it can't be the only one. Right? Like, I'm married, but John cannot be the only person that I have connection and meaningful relationship with. God made us to have different types of relationships, and so romantic relationships could be a expression of the type of longing for connectedness that God created us for, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that that's important to note too, of though God created you for this longing, and that's a part of what it means to be human, it can be fulfilled in ways outside of romantic relationships.
Yeah. And I think the important part of that, and there needs to be a healthy level of empathy and compassion in this sort of discussion. But as we engage in these kinds of conversations with high school kids, maybe even more so as you step into like college and young adults spheres, when I'm not tethered to a romantic relationship, there can be this automatic sense of like franticness of like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't have this. I feel incomplete. I feel whatever. And again, I want to be empathetic to those conversations, but I think it's worth just acknowledging maybe before we start to feel those things, and really kind of asking the question, like, is a romantic relationship a right of mine to be fulfilled? And I think part of our conversation is pointed the answer to that is no, not necessarily, right?
Yeah.
Now, again, compassion and empathy within those spaces, people who are longing for that and have that longing unfulfilled. But I think it's just worth us kind of identifying that and calling that out, especially because I think culturally there's elements that would reinforce the idea that you are entitled to this, and you should go and pursue it in whatever way is necessary for you to find romantic relationship or to find romantic love, rather than saying, maybe, just maybe, for a season or forever, that's not a part of my story.
Right.
And so I'm not going to break God's law by pursuing romantic relationships in ways that he hasn't ascribed to me, or I'm not going to force things in spaces rather than trusting God's provision for me. And again, there's loss and grief with that in a season or for a lifetime that we want to be conscious to and careful to attend to. But again, I do think it's worth just kind of calling out and drawing attention to.
Yeah, and there's a distinction there that I think culture says you will not have a fulfilled life, or it won't be as fulfilled as somebody else's if you don't have that romantic relationship, whether that's, short term or forever. And that's hard too, because when you're hearing and you're feeling from culture that my life will not be as fulfilling unless I have this thing, but then we're sitting here saying, well, that's not what God says.
Sure.
Like, God says, yes, you have this longing for relationship, but it can be fulfilled in many different ways. And romantically is just one expression of that. It's hard to hold those two things.
For sure.
And, we want to be compassionate when those two things kind of cause tension in our lives. And when there is that longing for that experience and it's not happening, we want to be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's a lot more we could go into with that. And I think, I'd encourage you can find all of our teaching videos on our YouTube channel as well, if you're interested in kind of hearing more about the topic of just relationship and community and connection with God and with the body of Christ. I'd encourage you to check those things out. By the time this is up, I think we'll have 2 of those videos on there, maybe just 1, I don't know, but you can kind of pop back in and see it's a 3-week series. Check it out, because there is a sense of that relationship we were created to experience is to be honestly fulfilled most fully and primarily in a relationship with God himself.
Yeah.
And then also in the good gift of community in the form of human relationships that he gives us. So again, more on that in the series, and certainly more on that in other conversations that we hope you guys are having. So that's the first part. Can I find and connect with a romantic partner? yes, you have the capacity to do so. You may or may not need to do so right now, and it's certainly not a right for you to be guaranteed to have at some point in time. So there's a sense of trust and patience that's necessitated within that, and just a proper situation of romance in the overall understanding of this longing that I have given to me by God to be in relationship with, in community with other people. The second half of the question, how do I navigate the complex world of attraction, dating, breaking up, engagement, and marriage? We could probably spend an entire, hour and a half long podcast episode talking about these things. I want to do us a favor and just cut off the last two of those, engagement and marriage. Maybe this is a false assumption, but I'm assuming that most of the people that we're talking to are not in a season of life in which those two things are realities for them right now.
Sure.
We might have some of our leaders or maybe fellow pastors who are tuning in and listening to this. If you were hoping to get advice on your engagement or marriage,
come chat with us.
Come and chat with us. There you go. But for the sake of this is a student-oriented podcast specifically aimed at our high schoolers, with some hope that our middle schoolers or maybe college kids are tuning in as well. But let's focus specifically on how to navigate the complex world of attraction, dating, and breaking up, as I think those three things are most likely to be realities for the people who are listening to this. There were kind of four things we were talking about this in planning for this episode that I felt like were really good kind of foundational elements to that. Before we jump into that, or maybe to jump into that, how would you kick this conversation off?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you and I talked about is like there's just a lot here. And even going back to the beginning, like I think, if we have a student that's walking through this, so much of what we would say would depend on the circumstances and who they are and what the dynamic is. And so we're probably going to keep it a little more broad because we don't know exactly what situation we're speaking into. Some of the things that I would say just like as prerequisites is like, one, if you haven't already, go back and watch our podcasts on relationships, like how to have healthy relationships and what to do in the context of when relationships aren't healthy. I think those are both really helpful in this conversation when we're talking about, this is the context of romantic relationships, but it's still an intimate relationship with someone else. And so listen to those if you haven't. And then two, like if you are in one of these spaces and you're saying, hey, I could really use some wisdom on my unique experience, please don't let this be the whole of the wisdom you're getting. Like, come chat with one of us. Even if you don't know us, like, send us an email, give us a call. We'd love to connect with you because we know we can't answer all the specifics to your circumstance in this podcast. This is just going to kind of be a broad, if we could just point people in the right direction, here's what we'd say.
Yeah, for sure. So some of the building blocks we talked about was, one, you navigate these things, attraction, dating, and breaking up, with wisdom, right? There's a level of wisdom necessitated within that. And it can be really easy to be like, well, of course you want to be wise. But again, you mentioned this a little bit ago, that when the world is screaming at me that my life is unfulfilled without some of these things, or when I'm just sensing that longing that exists within me, it can be very easy to just like jump in. Think about it this way, right? When I'm hungry, if I'm super hungry, let's say, I remember, I don't do this with regularity, so don't think too highly of me, anybody, but like I remember running a 10K a couple of years ago. When I was done with that race, I was super hungry. And it wouldn't have mattered what was offered to me. I would have just eaten it. In fact, I think I ate gummy bears right afterwards because like, I'm just hungry.
That actually sounds really good.
See, right? And so when there's a sense of longing and a desire for something, I don't always necessarily care that the thing being offered to me is the best option for me in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to just brush away this idea of exercising wisdom when stepping into these things, because it could be easy to not be wise about it. And so what were some of the things that kind of associated with wisdom? What are some of the practical elements of that you'd point a student to as they walk into processing their own attraction, dating somebody, or possibly breaking up with them?
Yeah, I think that's a good one, is like, we don't ever want to be reactionary. And so before you even begin entering into that realm, one, which we talked about in the very beginning, is like, know your motivation for this. Like, are you desiring a relationship because you're lonely and you think that person is going to fulfill something in you? Does it matter who the person is, or are you just desperate for a relationship? As you look for someone to date, are you just looking for anybody, or, what are the types of things and the type of person that you're looking for? And so that, don't be reactionary in that sense of like, how did I even end up in this relationship and who is this person that I've chosen to be with? But seek wise counsel, I think, is such a huge thing. And that's from, we talked about this in our relationships podcast, but like from peers, they're great. The friends that care about you, that are for you. They're going to know the type of person that's going to be good for you and the type that's not. And sometimes that gets messy and there's jealousy involved. But
Yep.
I think that you can glean a lot of wisdom from the friends that love you. But that also means adults and wise people that know you and that you can be honest with,
Yeah.
because they need to be able to call you out and say, hey, I actually think you're making a really poor decision in this. Don't underestimate mom and dad in that conversation, even if maybe you don't have the best relationship with mom and
Sure.
dad. I encourage you to at least try when it comes to this topic. And so seeking wisdom from others, I think, is such a huge thing on the front end. And then as you go through these stages of attraction, relationships, and breaking up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, I'll piggyback off that. And then just one thing maybe to add to it. When my wife and I were dating, and I had just started Bible school, and I was just like super amped. I'm going into ministry. I'm doing this thing. I remember like listening to all these pastors and like reading stuff from them. And you start to see like the role that their wife might play in their ministry space. And I started like, oh man, it's like, is this girl going to be able to be that? And like, so I started creating these like crazy expectations. I remember sitting down with a buddy of mine. He's a buddy now. He was a mentor at that time, but, and I was like, hey man, I think maybe we're supposed to break up, but like, I just want to talk to you about this because, whatever. And I remember we sat down at Five Guys, which is delicious. And it's a great place to just have a serious conversation with anybody because it's hard to be mad there, right? So I remember sitting down with him and we got our burgers, and the first thing he asked me was, like, are you willing to break up with her, right? And in my mind, I was kind of like, well, yeah, that's kind of why I sat down and was like, have this conversation. But he said, but like, are you actually willing to do the hard thing? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I think so. He said, because if you're not, and the point of this, there's no point to this conversation, right? And I think what that kind of reminded me of was that there are times where like, sometimes we'll seek wisdom because we just want to hear the wise words from other people, but I have no intention of actually doing anything with it.
Acting on those
Right.
things.
And so there's this sense of like, when I invite other people's wisdom, there has to be an openness to hear it and a desire to, if led by God's Spirit, apply that wisdom even when it's uncomfortable. And I remember looking at him and just saying like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I don't really want to break up with her. Like, I love this girl. We've been together at that time. We've been multiple years at that point. I said, but if my allegiance is first and foremost to Jesus, then I have to be willing to, right?
Yes.
And so I think
Yeah.
there's this sense of, again, I think sometimes we can surround ourselves with things that look like community and that look like wisdom, but then I'm just like ignoring all of that
but we're
stuff.
still going to do whatever
Right,
we want.
Right,
in
right,
that.
right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that just an aside, I suppose, for how we receive and what we do with that wisdom. But the thing I would say is just that self-awareness, I think, is super important when we
Yeah.
talk about entering into relationships. Like, this might be not a helpful conversation, but I think, in that discussion with this friend of mine was also the sense of like, what are you looking for in a relationship, right? And that needs definition, because if I just sort of walk into it and have zero expectation, then in some sense I'm bound to be upset.
Right.
Right.
And there's no such thing as zero expectation.
Of course.
It's just you haven't identified it in
Yep.
yourself, and then they end up letting you down and you don't even know
don't
why,
even know
and
why.
they don't know why, and that's not fair.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there's, even, I'm sure we could both speak to our own marriages and to see where like unvoiced expectations became unmet expectations that then became just angering, right? And so,
Chaos.
yeah, right. And so I think even more so in dating relationships where there's a sense that you're probably younger, right? Which means you're just generally a little less self-aware than somebody who might be older. And I hope that's not offensive. It's just a reality. And so how are you increasing your own self-awareness, identifying what are the needs that you have? What are the things that make you happy? What are the things that don't make you happy? Like even like really basic things,
Yeah.
right? And deciding how those are going to influence your participation in relationships. So alongside of community and receiving wisdom and whatnot, part of that is just your own self-awareness. How do you know you? And that's not to say that you won't change. I know people who are married who like every 5 years they redo their vows because they recognize they're married to different people 5 years later than they were 5 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that goes along with being self-aware that is just hard is like there's a level of responsibility that you have when you engage in a relationship with with a person for that person. Like this is no longer just about you, and the consequences aren't just yours.
Yeah.
And so along with that self-awareness, there has to be a level of selflessness
Yeah.
because you are now stewarding another person that God loves and
Yeah.
made in his image, and he thinks that they're incredibly precious and wants to protect them. And so if you're not in a place where you can give of yourself selflessly, not to the extent where you're being taken advantage
Sure.
of,
Yeah.
but to the extent that you're willing to maybe put aside your discomfort
Yeah.
or put aside your needs to meet the needs of another person. And even I think that then goes into kind of the breaking up of like, how are you treating that
Yep.
person in that process? Because there has to be an extensive desire to love that person, which means putting them above yourself. And not everybody in all seasons has the capacity to do that. That's
Yeah.
just a reality. And I think even in marriages, you see like there's times that I do that better than others. And
Sure.
there's times that I fail at that. But if you're thinking about entering into a relationship, you have to be in a place where you're willing to do that for that person, because otherwise you're being really irresponsible
Sure.
with another person. And that's just not wise. That's not kind. And that's not honoring to the Lord.
No, for sure. And I think you said this, but just for reiteration's sake, selflessness is not a reason to stay in an unhealthy or abusive relationship, right?
Absolutely.
And that's where having a community around you and having mentors who have eyes on that relationship and eyes on you is helpful to kind of call that stuff to the surface. And so again, just reiterating that for people who might be listening to this and wondering, or for whom that might be the reality. If that's you, get out, right? That's not a relationship you want to stay in.
And if that's a dynamic you're seeing in your home, whether that's the example you've been set by family members, like that doesn't mean love, and that's not what God's designed for these type of relationships is.
For sure. And part of the reason why we haven't gone specifically into how do you navigate attraction, how do you navigate dating, how do you navigate breaking up, is because the reality is these principles that we're talking about, things like wisdom and community and selflessness, should just be perpetually applied with regularity to all of these things, right? When I find myself attracted to somebody, I should process in these ways with wisdom, with community, with selflessness. When I start dating that person, I should apply wisdom, community, selflessness. When I decide maybe to break up with that person, those same things should be applied. And
or if I'm broken up with, I still need to respond in these ways.
Yeah, exactly. And so these are not like one and done, like, well, I prayed about it once and then I felt like, yep, this was good. And so I just stayed with this person forever or whatever, right? But and I sort of let the cat out of the bag on the last one. The last one would just be prayer, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that can be thrown out as this like, just pray, right? In fact, we're in a community group together. One of the things we were just reading the other day was like, sometimes we just like, all I can do is pray, as if that's like just throw your hands up and whatever, right? But this sense that like prayer, if I believe in what prayer is, it is communing with the God of the universe, talking with, conversating with, speaking to and hearing from a God who knows me and loves me and has sacrificed for me in ways that I couldn't ever fully fathom, right? And so he knows my needs and he knows my longings and he knows wise things, right? And he's good to share those with us. And so I think there's a sense of, again, we can sort of either put prayer on the back burner because it's just not like, it's not like active enough or something. But don't neglect that. Like that's something to just like these relationships in general, particularly romantic relationships, I think are so important that they're worth holding before God and saying, I need your wisdom. I need your guidance in this. And trusting that God's not going to forsake us in those requests.
Yeah. And I think too, like asking God to give you all of those other things that we talked about, like asking God to give you wisdom and to give you self-awareness and to help you be a selfless person and praying, if you're in that stage of you're thinking about dating someone or you are dating someone or you think you might need to break up with someone, like praying for that person, because ultimately as Christ followers, our pursuit is to be more like Christ and to help others be more like Christ. And so as you interact with that person, how are you praying for them? How are you praying with them? And how are you making sure that thing stays the main thing and not letting the relationship kind of override your pursuit of being made into the image of Christ?
Yeah, that's really good stuff. Surprisingly, we're sticking on time here.
I know, we thought we were going to run way over.
And we probably could, but we're keeping ourselves on track. So
look at us go.
Any last thoughts that you want to kind of wrap this up with before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate, like, I know, like, we have conversations with students a lot about relationships, and this was kind of like a neatly packaged, really broad thing. And I don't want our students to feel like we're dismissive of kind of the nuances and the complexity of their world in this. Like, I get that this is really hard and you guys lose sleep over this and you want to be in good relationships and you want to make wise decisions and you want to choose the right people. And so we care really deeply about you and what season of life you're in, whether this is a longing of yours or whether or not, you feel like you're never going to find someone that you can be with, whatever it is, like we care about those things. And though this was kind of a glaze over, doesn't mean that we take these things lightly, and we care really deeply about where you're at, and we pray for you guys. And we pray these things for you guys because we care about you. And so don't walk away discouraged that we just made this sound so easy and you're like, this is not an easy thing for me. We know that, and that's why we're talking about it. And this is just, as all of our podcasts are, a way to begin the conversation, but know that we're here for you. Reach out to people, reach out to us, because we know this is just the start of the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And a quick left turn here. If you enjoyed this, like it, give us some stars, share it. If you have a friend, the part of the hope for this too is that this not only blesses you, but this might be a resource for you to share with other people. So if you've got friends who are in a season of life where it's something that they're wrestling through, we're trying to figure out, feel free to pass this along to them and be that community for them. There's value in that as well. So we love you guys. If you love us, like us, rate us, share us, all that kind of cool stuff. Again, that sounds really conceited, but I'm just doing this for Marcy Lynn. So if you just want to put all that stuff on there, that's great. And I'm doing this for you because the better our reviews, the more easy it is for you to find our stuff. If you turn on the bell as well, guess what happens? Every time we drop one of these things. I've
never heard somebody say turn on the bell.
What do you say?
You get notifications.
Yeah, you turn on the bell.
You don't turn on bells.
You do turn on bell. When the bells are digital, you have to turn them on. Hit the bell. Ding dong. That's it. See you, friends. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe to be notified when our next episode drops. And if you know someone who would benefit from today's discussion, share it with them. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover, you can share it with us on Instagram, or you can text us. Info for that's available in our show notes. We'll see you next time on Front Row.